Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ramadan Mubarak. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the healthy Muslim in Ramadan. Having gloried in the tradition of the early Muslim world and the amazing, extraordinary intellectual advance that was achieved by the first Muslims with the wealth which they had acquired through the conquering of other lands, I now have to sadly report that after those lands were sacked at a time of war, so much of that scientific knowledge was destroyed. Little bit of the books of medicine were preserved, but none of the practice of medicine. The Islamic world retreated back into poverty, and its medicine retreated back into animistic practices and into traditional herbal medicine. The knowledge that was in these books was not enough to create the treatments that had been available in the 12th and 13th centuries. There were no more hospitals. No one had the wisdom of surgery. No one could do cataracts anymore. The understanding of how to treat the mentally ill, the understanding of pharmacies, purification of medicines, all of this was lost. The books was preserved, but the knowledge went. So we went genuinely in Europe into the Dark Ages. And the Dark Ages lasted a long time, by which I mean four to 5 centuries. The Muslims who had been scrupulously clean, with hygienic practices in their lives, water was very carefully organized in such a way that there was a sewage system. You wouldn't have open sewers, you would have clean water. That was lost. And Europe was a sad place. However, man has a great capacity to rediscover his old understandings. And very gradually, with increasing wealth in Europe, modern science developed a little bit on the knowledge and wisdom that was still present in the books. Hippocrates and Galen translated from Greek into Latin via the Arab text and the original treatises of Ibn Sina. What then happened to what we now know as modern medicine? The first thing that is really exciting about modern medicine was the discovery of the cause of infection. During the 18th century, sure, there were the beginning of the understanding of childbirth. There was some very nice early surgical practices, cutting for stone, forceps for the delivery of a baby, and so on. And these were good inventions. But infection, because of the problems in hygiene, was rife. And the development of public health paralleled the understanding of the bacteria, the cause of illness, and the development of antibiotics. From there, very quickly, we have a big renaissance, absolutely in 1 century. Johns Hopkins Hospital, which is now the greatest hospital in the world, founded by an obscure, rather crazy Irish bachelor who had made his money from the railroads in America, but had a compassion towards the laborers in the port of Baltimore and felt that he should, from his own wealth, he should care for them. A genuine philanthropist. But when he tried to hire physicians of the day, these were people who'd been to Harvard and Yale and had obtained arts degrees, and just as a hobby practiced medicine. And they didn't like him because he was a common, rich working man, somebody that they would call an arriviste, who was an engineer. And the Harvard and Yaleys didn't mix with people like him. So rebuffed by the American aristocracy, he sent his students to Europe to learn from the early Germans and from the French the beginnings of the science of bacteriology and chemistry and physiology. That science came back to America, and the beginning of the scientific reformation in Europe and in America was born. From the understanding of chemistry, pharmacology, you come to the major drugs for the treatment of blood pressure, for the treatment of immune diseases, for allergy. You develop steroids, we develop cancer treatments. The explosion in pharmacy in 1 century has been astonishing. With this has been the explosion of technology. The technology available in 1910 was primitive, really primitive. What is available now is stratospheric. A cyberknife machine costs millions of pounds. One treatment for a person with cancer will cost between 60 and 100,000 pounds. This is the price of technology today, and it's effective. It's extraordinary. It's what I call boys' toys. It's such fun seeing what can be done today. If you have a tumor that is wrapped around the aorta, the tube coming out of your heart that's opening and shutting like that, it's difficult to treat. It's almost impossible to unravel surgically. And if you're going to treat it with radiotherapy, any rays that are given by conventional methods are going to burn a hole in the aorta and the patient will die. Not with the cyberknife. The cyberknife gives precise little dots of sealant, and each burst is a micro fraction of a second, timed by computer, watching the movement of the aorta so that the aorta is never touched. That's clever. And the same thing is helping men with cancer of the prostate and with other conditions, tumors within the spinal cord and so on. People who would have a long and debilitating treatment, now just have 5 days of treatment, they're cured. It's easy. It's a machine. That's when machines do good, and I love them. Technology of investigations mean that we can treat things much, much earlier and therefore have more chance of cure. But with technology has come something deeply corrupting in medicine. And it's a corruption I seriously regret. As a Muslim who has praised the golden age of Islamic medicine in the 12th century, I urge anyone watching this program who's sympathetic to the concept of holistic medicine to read back on the wisdom of those times, on the wisdom of how a physician approached a patient, how the patient was treated as a human being in the context of who he was, his tradition, his culture, his country, his environment, his family, his capacities, his overall strength or weakness. All of these things were taken into account. Now, all they want to know is your date of birth first, probably, and then your name, and after that you're referred to by a number. They don't want your name anymore. Everything is numeric because that's easier for the computer to recognize. The machine has taken over. The machine is taking over also, sadly, in how we understand the right to have treatment. This is important. Come back after the break, please. Welcome back. You remember how clear it was at the time of the Islamic Golden Age that medicine was seen as a right, that healing was part of your provision from Allah, and the doctor was merely an instrument of that provision. He saw himself helping you in the context of philosophy, in the context of psychology, and in the context of spiritual healing. The science was important, but not separate at all from the overall concept, which was holistic. The governments of that time echoed that, and what was happening in Baghdad, in Cordoba, in Egypt, was that luxurious hospitals were developed for the service of the patient, which was completely free. In the 21st century, technology has exploded in the service of numbers. The numbers carefully audit the cost of medicine, not its benefit. The benefit of medicine is looked at in very reductive terms, mortality rates. You don't hear mortality rates mentioned in Islamic medicine. You hear a forward view, but we don't know how to measure healing. The only absolute in modern medicine is a zero, which is dead. The other absolute is profit. Medicine is paid for by the state. It's also paid for by insurance. Insurance companies exist to make money. It's now a fraud in American medicine costing $25 billion, billion, not million, has just been discovered. Entirely fraudulent administration of government funds. Of the top 10 companies in America, 8 are big pharma. And there is a very important law, which is the patent law. If a pharmacy company invents a medicine, that medicine can be sold. Medicine at the time of the Prophet and in the golden age of Islam was free. There has been a plague in our times. It's called AIDS, the human HIV, human immunovirus. It's a terrifying disease that has killed millions. In Africa, because the cost of HIV medicines was so high, the mortality rate was terrifying. You would find whole areas dying. Children were left without parents or grandparents. The oldest child in a village would be 15. And they were feral. They were living off scrubland. At this time, a philanthropist from India decided to make antiretrovirals, the known drugs for HIV, and market them at cost, breaking patent laws. The American government responded that they couldn't do that. The cost for the Indian philanthropist treatment would have been $1 a day. The American cost was $150 a day. The American government said that if they broke patent laws, if Africa broke patent laws, all aids, including the aid from Bill Gates, would be stopped. So the shipment never happened. In the year and a half that followed, 1.5 million people died. Then in America, 7 people died of anthrax because some idiot put anthrax in the post. It was a terrorist act, not a Muslim one, an ordinary homegrown American terrorist act. The American government panicked, told the pharmacology companies that they had to supply the medicine at cost, which they did. Immediately, a bright African physician said, "Ha ha, that is legal precedent," and he ordered the medicine from the Indian philanthropist, which was shipped immediately. The African physician was arrested, the ship was impounded. Ex-President Bill Clinton came over and agreed this was legal precedent, and Indian pharmaceuticals were able to flood into Africa. Since then, it has been possible to confidently tell a pregnant woman that her baby will be born without HIV if she is HIV positive. And the mortality is absolutely decimated. Few people now in Africa are dying. When I tried to discuss this with a very clever person who understands finance in America, he said, "You don't understand. We have capitalism. We don't care about 1.5 million Africans. We only care about profits." That is what has taken over medicine today. I deeply regret what I see as the direction that my profession is going in. I sense the fear that patients have when they realize they can't afford their medicine, their insurance is running out, they have to stomp up a copay that they didn't know they'd have to. They skip their medicines or take it every third day, hoping that way they can eke it out. They fail to turn up to follow-up appointments because they dread being asked to have blood tests, which they won't be covered for. Medicine is no longer a right. In government medicine, there's a deep malaise. The audit is not of care, it's of money. And the provision is being dumbed down. We have managers who are not doctors, who are controlling the disposition of the funds and auditing the quality of the results. Don't trust their audit, it's fraudulent. And please sue me. I can prove it. And the quality of what the doctors are being processed to do is getting worse. My very dear colleague who looks after my patients when I'm away, I've known him since we were medical students. His father was a delight, a consultant psychiatrist, a wise man, gentle, human, caring. He was doing well in his old age. His wife died, but he was independent. His son organized a carer, and he had only minor illnesses. One year, he got a chest infection, went a bit confused because he had pneumonia, was admitted to hospital, given intravenous antibiotics, got better and went home. All was well. 2 years later, my colleague received a phone call from an unnamed person who just said to him, "Why haven't you visited your father?" He said, "My father's fine. I spoke to him 2 weeks ago. I visited him a month ago. He's absolutely fine." And she said, "No, she isn't. He's dying. He's in our ward." And he said, "Well, you must have the wrong person." "No, he's been admitted with Alzheimer's disease. He's terminal, and we put him on the Liverpool care pathway." This, for those of you who don't live in England, is a technique the government hospitals use for people they don't want to treat. They put them in a corner, don't give them fluids, don't give them any care whatsoever. It is a Liverpool pathway, but it doesn't have care attached to it. My colleague said, "It can't be true. My father doesn't have Alzheimer's. You've got the wrong person." "No, we haven't. His carer sent him in. We have her name on the notes, and she called an ambulance and sent him in. And he was seen by a doctor who saw that he couldn't identify who the Prime Minister was, and he didn't seem to know his own name, and couldn't read the text that was put in front of him. So we realised he had advanced Alzheimer's, and I'm afraid he's now very close to death, because we haven't given him any fluids for 4 days. He died. This was a man who was doing the crossword in 20 minutes, only 10 days before. Did the hospital investigate? No. This is what happens every day. Their attitude was to shrug their shoulders and say, well, it wasn't our business to know. Would that have happened in the time of Islam? I promise you, it would not. First of all, we would have existed in extended families. You would have lived in a community. You would have had people to sensitively know what was happening day by day. Modern medicine has great things, but it's sick and is going in the wrong direction. Watch carefully and be careful when you go to your doctor. Whatever you do, don't stop Islamic traditional medical practices. Assalamu alaikum.